They arranged a cinematic family table with calligraphy cards for everyone, yet they deliberately left no seat for me. My mother told me to hide in the alley so I would not ruin their aesthetic, while my sister smirked as if I were lost help. But when the manager arrived holding a bill for $12,000, my sister turned pale. He was calling out the exact name they had just thrown into the garbage. My name is Madeline Rivera, and standing there at the wrought iron gates of the venue, I felt less like a human being and more like a smudge on a camera lens that someone was desperate to wipe away. The heat in Charleston was already oppressive, a heavy, wet blanket that smelled of pluff mud and expensive perfume, but the air around my mother seemed to drop 20 degrees the moment she saw me. The venue was an estate garden that had been manicured into submission. The theme was Ivory Garden. It was an aggressive display of neutrality. There were thousands of white hydrangeas, white roses, and white orchids imported from somewhere tropical, all arranged in towering sculptures that defied gravity. Ribbons of pale gold silk fluttered from the ancient oak trees, catching the dappled sunlight. Every guest I could see was dressed in varying shades of linen, cream, and eggshell. They looked like statues carved from butter, soft and rich, and melting in the humidity. And then there was me. I was wearing a charcoal gray hoodie that had seen better days, a pair of dark denim jeans, and scuffed sneakers. In my right hand, I held a brown paper gift bag, the kind you get from a grocery store, tied shut with a piece of rough, fibrous twine. It was not an aesthetic choice, it was a functional one, but in this sea of curated perfection, I looked like a dark bruise. My mother, Lorraine, did not wait for me to step fully onto the slate patio. She intercepted me with the speed and precision of a heat-seeking missile. She was wearing a structured dress that probably cost more than my first car, and her face was set in a rictus of panic. "Stop," she said. It was not a shout, it was a hiss, low and vibrant with venom. She planted herself physically in front of me, blocking my view of the party, as if my mere presence would cause the champagne to go flat. "What in God's name are you wearing, Madeline?" I shifted the bag to my other hand. The twine dug into my palm. "Hello to you too, Mom," I said. My voice sounded loud in the hushed elegance of the garden. "I came straight from the site. You said start time was 2 o'clock. It is 2 o'clock." Lorraine looked me up and down, her lip curling as her eyes snagged on a stray thread on my sleeve. "You are ruining the aesthetic," she said. She spoke the word aesthetic as if it were a holy commandment I had just spat upon. "Look at you. You look like a vagrant, a delivery person. I told you this was Ivory Garden. I told you the dress code was elevated daytime chic." "I have been working," I said, trying to keep the exhaustion out of my tone. "I brought the gift. I just wanted to say, congratulations to Paige and grab something to eat." Lorraine actually laughed. It was a sharp, barking sound that she immediately smothered with a cough. She grabbed my upper arm, her fingers digging into the muscle with surprising strength. She began to steer me backward, away from the white-clothed tables and the string quartet. "You are not going in there," she whispered. "The photographer is doing the wide-angle ambience shots right now. If you walk into that frame, you will destroy the entire composition. Do you have any idea how much this cost? Do you have any idea how hard your sister has worked for this image?" I looked past her shoulder. In the center of the garden, raised slightly on a wooden platform draped in faux fur rugs, sat my sister, Paige. She was 7 months pregnant and glowing with the kind of radiance that usually requires a lighting crew. She sat on a high-backed velvet chair that looked absurdly like a throne. She was laughing, her head thrown back, one hand resting protectively on her bump, while a circle of women in matching beige dresses cooed at her. Paige looked up. Her eyes met mine across the 20 yards of perfectly green grass. I saw recognition. I saw her register the hoodie, the jeans, the brown paper bag. I saw her mother manhandling me at the gate, and then, with the practiced ease of a politician, she looked right through me. She turned back to her friends, pointing at a gift box, effectively erasing my existence. "She sees me," I said to Lorraine. "She is focusing on her joy." Lorraine snapped, She spun me around so I was facing the street. Directly across the narrow service alley from the venue was a looming, ugly structure. It was an old industrial warehouse. The red brick faded and chipped, the windows high and barred with rusted iron. It had a sign that read, "No trespassing," and looked like a relic of a time when Charleston was about grit, not glamour. "Go stand over there," Lorraine commanded, pointing a manicured finger at the warehouse wall. "In the alley. Just wait there. Once the photographer is done with the main set and the lighting changes, maybe you can sneak in the back way and put your little bag on the table, but do not let anyone see you." My stomach gave a violent growl, loud enough that Lorraine flinched. I had been up since 4 a.m. overseeing a shipment, and I had driven straight here without stopping. The smell of roasted pork loin and truffle oil wafting from the catering tent was making me lightheaded. "Mom, I am starving," I said. The plea tasted bitter in my mouth. I hated asking her for anything, but my blood sugar was crashing. "Can I just go to the buffet and get a plate? I will take it to the alley. I just need food." Lorraine looked at me with a profound, terrifying disappointment. It was the same look she had given me when I didn't make the cheerleading squad in high school, or when I chose a state college over a finishing school. It was the look of someone inspecting a defective product. "That food is $40 a head," she said coldly. "It is for the guests who are celebrating Paige, guests who dressed for the occasion, guests who are worthy of the investment. Do not embarrass us by scavenging like a rat. You wait. If there are leftovers after the cake cutting, I will have a server bring you a napkin." She gave me one final shove toward the shadows of the alley and turned her back. She smoothed her dress, fixed her smile, and walked back into the sunlight, blending perfectly into the ivory world she had curated. I stood there for a moment, the heat radiating off the brick wall behind me. I should have left. Any person with a shred of self-preservation would have thrown the bag in the gutter and driven away. But a lifetime of conditioning is a hard chain to break. I was the younger sister. I was the messy one. I was the one who was supposed to take what I was given. I stepped deeper into the shade of the alley, trying to make myself invisible as ordered. From my vantage point, I could look through the iron bars of the fence and see the side of the main party area. I had a clear view of the long head table. It was a masterpiece of table setting. A single long table for the immediate family. Draped in heavy linen, there were crystal goblets, gold flatware, and massive centerpieces of white peonies. At each place setting, there was a piece of thick, handmade cardstock with the guest's name written in sweeping, elegant calligraphy. I scanned the names: Lorraine Rivera, Gavin Mitchell, my brother-in-law, Paige Mitchell, Aunt Carol. And then I saw it. At the far end of the table, near the edge, there was a card. Madeline Rivera. My heart gave a stupid, hopeful little jump. They had expected me. There was a seat. Maybe Lorraine was just stressed. Maybe once the photos were done, I would be allowed to sit there. The calligraphy was beautiful. The gold ink shimmered in the sun. It was proof that I was part of this family. I watched as Paige stood up from her throne. She waddled slightly, playing up the pregnancy for the crowd, and made her way over to the family table to inspect the setup. The event planner, a man in a black suit with a headset, hurried over to her, holding a clipboard. Paige pointed a finger at the end of the table. At my seat, I saw her lips move. I was too far away to hear the words, but the body language was loud and clear. She gestured to my chair, then gestured to the open space of the lawn. She made a sweeping motion with her hand, a remove-it motion. The planner nodded vigorously. He stepped forward and grabbed the back of the white wooden chair designated for me. He folded it shut with a snap. He carried it away, leaning it against a distant tree trunk. Now there was a gap in the table settings, a missing tooth in the perfect smile of the family dinner. But my name card was still there, sitting on the empty patch of tablecloth. Paige looked at the card. She did not pick it up. She flicked it with her fingernail, like she was flicking a bug off her sleeve. The planner rushed back. He scooped up the card with Madeline Rivera written on it in gold. He looked around for a place to put it. Paige said something else, something brief and dismissive, and pointed toward the service station where the bussers were clearing dirty appetizers. The planner walked over to a large gray plastic bin. It was filled with crumpled napkins, half-eaten shrimp tails, and skewers slick with cocktail sauce. He dropped my name card into the bin. I watched it fall. I had 20/20 vision. I saw the card flutter down and land face up on a pile of napkins stained with reddish-orange remoulade. A half-eaten crab cake landed on top of it a second later, thrown by a passing waiter. I waited for the tears. I waited for the familiar burn in my throat, the stinging in my eyes that had accompanied every birthday I was forgotten, every graduation where they showed up late, every moment of my life where I had been made to feel like an accidental footnote in the biography of Paige Rivera. But the tears did not come. Instead, I felt a click. It was a physical sensation, like a heavy deadbolt sliding into place deep inside my chest. It was the sound of a mechanical failure, or perhaps a mechanical correction. The engine of my desperate need for their approval had just run out of fuel. It sputtered, coughed, and died. I stood in the alley, smelling the garbage from the venue and the exhaust from the street, and I felt a strange, icy calm wash over me. The humidity didn't feel oppressive anymore. It just felt like weather. For 30 years, I had been the burden. Paige was the star, the golden child, the one who married the handsome entrepreneur, the one who gave our mother the bragging rights she craved. I was Madeline the tomboy, Madeline who liked dirt and physics and building things, Madeline who dropped out of the right circles to do God knows what, Madeline who was always just a little too loud, a little too rough, a little too real for their soft focus world. I looked at the brown paper bag in my hand. Inside was a blanket. It wasn't just a blanket. It was a prototype woven from a proprietary blend of temperature-regulating nanofibers that my company had just patented. It was soft as cashmere, but durable as Kevlar. It was worth more than the entire catering budget of this party. I had woven it myself, sitting at the loom in the lab late at night, thinking about my niece or nephew, pouring my love into every thread. I looked back at the bin where my name was buried under garbage. Lorraine had told me to wait in the alley. She had told me to wait until I was useful, until I could be hidden, until I could be tolerated. "Okay," I said aloud. My voice was steady. "I will wait." I turned away from the ivory garden. I turned toward the ugly brick warehouse that Lorraine had sneered at, the warehouse that bore the sign, "No trespassing." Lorraine thought she had banished me to a purgatory of rust and decay. She thought she had sent me to the backstage of her life. She didn't know that she hadn't sent me away. She had sent me home. The walk across the service alley took less than 30 seconds, but in that short span of time, I crossed a border more significant than any line drawn on a map. I left the humid, perfumed air of the ivory garden behind, stepping over puddles of stagnant water and broken glass that decorated the asphalt of the loading lane. To my right, the sounds of the string quartet playing a violin cover of a pop song faded into the background, replaced by the low, steady hum of industrial compressors. I stopped in front of the building Lorraine had pointed at with such disdain, to the outside observer, and certainly to my family. This structure was an eyesore. It was a relic of Charleston's industrial past, a hulking mass of red brick stained with soot, its windows darkened by decades of grime or boarded up with plywood. The metal door in front of me was dented and covered in layers of peeling gray paint. A sign bolted to the brick at eye level read, "No trespassing," inaggressively, stenciled red letters, and below that, a smaller sign warned of 24-hour video surveillance. Lorraine saw a dumpster fire. She saw a place to hide the family embarrassment. I saw the best camouflage money could buy. I reached into the back pocket of my jeans and pulled out a card. It was matte black, devoid of any bank logo, magnetic strip, or identifying numbers. It was heavy, made of a dense composite material, and cool to the touch. I stepped up to a rusted electrical junction box mounted next to the door, the kind that looked like it hadn't been opened since the 1990s. I pressed the card against the bottom left corner of the metal casing. There was no beep, There was no flashing light, just a heavy, solid thunk of a magnetic lock disengaging from the inside, followed by the hiss of pneumatic seals breaking their vacuum. I pushed the dented gray door open and stepped inside. The transition was instantaneous and jarring. The heat and humidity of the South Carolina afternoon were sliced away, replaced by climate-controlled air kept at a crisp 68 degrees. The smell of garbage and marsh mud vanished, overtaken by the scent of ozone, ionized air, and the faint, clean smell of fresh espresso. As the door clicked shut behind me, sealing perfectly, the illusion of the derelict warehouse dissolved. I was standing in the intake lobby of North Pier Materials Collective. The floors were not cracked concrete but seamless, high-gloss white epoxy that reflected the overhead track lighting like a mirror. To my left, a wall of monitors displayed real-time logistics data, tracking shipping containers moving across the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. Lines of neon green and blue traced routes from textile mills in Osaka to distribution centers in Hamburg. To my right, behind a wall of soundproof glass, was the primary testing lab. Robotic arms were rhythmically stretching a piece of jet-black fabric, testing its tensile strength, while a wind tunnel simulated hurricane-force gales against a mannequin dressed in one of our proprietary storm shells. This was my kingdom. This was the empire that Madeline the Failure had built. I walked past the security desk. The guard, a massive man named Marcus, who had retired from the Marines 3 years ago, looked up from his monitors. He didn't sneer at my hoodie. He didn't look at my shoes. He stood up straight, nodding his head with genuine deference. "Good afternoon, Director Rivera," Marcus said. His voice was deep and respectful. "You are in early. I thought you were at a family event." The event did not require my presence for long. "Marcus," I replied, keeping my voice steady, though he likely saw the tension in my jaw. "Is the shipment from Milan in yet?" "Docked an hour ago. The team is cataloging the samples now." I nodded and kept walking, moving deeper into the facility. My sneakers squeaked faintly on the pristine floor. I passed the open-plan design studio where a dozen people were working at drafting tables and computer terminals. These were some of the brightest minds in textile engineering and fashion design. People I had poached from top firms in New York and Paris. They were designing high-performance streetwear jackets that could withstand sub-zero temperatures but weighed less than a cotton t-shirt. Pants that were fire-resistant but looked like high-end denim. We supplied the special forces. We supplied extreme alpinists. We supplied the kind of streetwear brands that sold out in seconds and resold for thousands of dollars online. North Pier was the ghost in the machine, the invisible manufacturer behind the labels, and we printed money. A young woman looked up from her microscope as I passed. "Director," she said, giving a quick wave. "Director Rivera," a man called out from a drafting table, holding up a swatch of fabric. "We fixed the breathability issue on the Mark IV prototype." "Excellent," I said, not breaking my stride. "Put the report on my server. I will read it tonight." I didn't stop until I reached the elevator at the far end of the hall. I pressed the button for the 4th floor, the executive suite. As the doors slid open, I found Nina waiting for me. Nina was my director of material science and arguably the only person on Earth who knew the full extent of the duality I lived. She was wearing a lab coat over a sharp blazer, holding a tablet against her chest. She took one look at my face. Then her eyes dropped to the brown paper grocery bag still clutched in my hand. She didn't ask if the party was fun. She didn't ask how the baby was. "They did it again, didn't they?" Nina asked quietly. Her voice wasn't pitying. It was furious. I stepped out of the elevator and walked toward my office, Nina falling into step beside me. "I was obstructing the aesthetic," I said. "Apparently, I do not match the Ivory Garden theme. Lorraine sent me here to wait by the dumpster until they are done taking photos." Nina made a sound of disgust in the back of her throat. "You own the building. Madeline, you could buy that venue and turn it into a parking lot by tomorrow morning if you wanted to." "They do not know that," I reminded her. "Because you won't tell them," Nina countered. We had had this argument 100 times. You let them treat you like a stray dog while you are sitting on a logistics empire. I stopped at the door to my office. It was a corner suite with floor-to-ceiling glass walls. I pushed the door open and walked inside, tossing the brown paper bag onto my desk. The desk was a slab of reclaimed architectural glass, sleek and modern, covered in neatly stacked reports and fabric swatches. I do not tell them because I know exactly what would happen if I did, I said. I walked over to the large window that looked out over the alley. From this height, the view was entirely different. I wasn't looking through iron bars anymore. I was looking down. Far below, across the narrow strip of the alley, the ivory garden looked like a dollhouse set. The towering white floral arrangements looked like cotton balls. The guests in their beige and cream outfits looked like tiny, insignificant specks of dust moving across a green felt table. I could see Paige's throne. From here, it looked ridiculous. A gaudy velvet chair sitting on the grass. I could see Lorraine fluttering around the photographer, waving her arms. If I told them, I said, watching my mother command a waiter to move a fern 2 inches to the left. It would not be admiration I received. It would be an invoice. I remembered the day I decided to keep North Pier a secret. It was 5 years ago. I had just secured my first major government contract for thermal insulation liners. I was 26, bursting with pride, and I had gone to dinner at Gavin and Paige's house. I had started to tell them that I was working on a startup. Gavin had laughed. He had actually laughed while swirling his wine. "Oh, Maddie," he had said, using that patronizing nickname I hated. "Another little project. Is this like the Etsy jewelry phase or the dog walking phase? Look, if you need a real job, I can maybe get you an interview at the front desk of my gym. It pays minimum wage, but it is steady," Paige had chimed in. "Just don't ask us for seed money. Okay, we are saving for a boat." They hadn't even let me finish the sentence. They had decided who I was, the screw-up, the dreamer, the financial drain, and they refused to let me be anything else. So, I let them have their narrative. I realized that night that my anonymity was my armor. If they thought I was broke, they couldn't ask me to fund Gavin's failing investments. If they thought I was a failure, they couldn't demand I hire their incompetent friends. If they thought I was nothing, they left me alone to work. And I had worked. I had worked 18-hour days. I had slept on the floor of this warehouse before the renovation. I had negotiated deals in Tokyo at 3 a.m. I had built North Pier from a single patent into a beast that generated 8 figures in annual revenue. And today, they had thrown my name in the trash. "Director." Nina's voice brought me back from the window. She was standing by the desk, looking at the brown paper bag. "Is this the gift?" I turned away from the window, leaving the view of the ants behind. I walked over to the desk and untied the rough twine. "Yes," I said. I pulled the blanket out. It unfolded like liquid. It was a soft, creamy white, ironically, perfectly matching their theme. But it wasn't cotton or wool. It was a triboelectric nanogenerator fabric. It harvested kinetic energy from movement and body heat to self-regulate temperature. It was antimicrobial, hydrophobic, and practically indestructible. Yet it felt softer than the most expensive cashmere on the market. I had spent 6 months overseeing the development of this specific weave. I had intended it to be the first thing my niece or nephew felt a layer of protection from the world, crafted by the ant who wasn't allowed to sit at the table. "It is beautiful," Nina said softly, touching the edge of the fabric. "This is the prototype from the Sigma line. The military is paying $300 a yard for the tactical version of this. It was meant for the baby," I said, my voice flat. "Not for Paige, not for Lorraine, for the baby." I looked at the blanket, lying there on the glass desk in the middle of my high-tech fortress. It looked out of place here, too soft, too innocent. But it also looked expensive. It looked like quality. It looked like something that didn't belong in a brown paper bag. They threw my name card in the garbage. "Nina," I said, looking up at her. Paige had the planner fold up my chair. Nina's face hardened. She dropped the professional demeanor entirely. "Okay, so what are we doing?" Because you are not going back out there to beg for a slice of cake. I sat down in my chair, my Herman Miller Aeron chair. Not a folding chair, not a bench in an alley. I swiveled slightly to face the bank of monitors on my side wall. No, I said. I am not going back out there. I tapped the keyboard to wake up my computer. The screens flared to life, asking for my biometric authentication. I placed my thumb on the scanner. The system logged me in as administrator. I am done begging, I told Nina. They wanted me to stay in the warehouse, fine. I will stay in the warehouse. But since I'm here, I might as well do some accounting. I opened a spreadsheet. It wasn't a company file. It was a personal finance tracker labeled Family Support. They think this is a shelter for their garbage, I said, gesturing to the building around us. They are about to find out it is a command center. I looked at the blanket one last time, then pushed it aside. I didn't need the comfort. I needed the cold, hard clarity of numbers. I looked at the screen, where the cursor blinked, waiting for a command. Pull up the banking logs. Nina, I said, my voice dropping to a temperature that matched the room. Let's see exactly how much this aesthetic has cost me. The file opened with a silence that felt heavier than the one in the room. Family Support. It was a benign name for a document that was essentially a chronicle of my own exploitation. The spreadsheet populated the screen, column after column of dates, recipients, amounts, and notes. It was a waterfall of red text, scrolling down and down, a visual representation of a hemorrhage I had been voluntarily sustaining for years. Nina stood silently behind me, her eyes scanning the data over my shoulder. She knew better than to speak. The air in the office had shifted from professional determination to something brittle and dangerous. I scrolled to the top of the current fiscal year. January 15th, recipient Paige Mitchell, amount $4,500. Note, credit card minimum payment, urgent. I remembered that call. Paige had been hysterical, claiming Gavin's bonus hadn't cleared yet, and the interest rate was going to skyrocket. I had transferred the money from my personal savings while sitting in a board meeting in Tokyo, excusing myself to handle a family emergency. February 3rd, recipient Lorraine Rivera, amount $2,800. Note medical copay. Specialist, March 10th, recipient Gavin Mitchell, amount $15,000. Note bridge loan for startup inventory. I paused on that one. $15,000. Gavin had told me he needed to buy server space and initial stock for his new tech consulting firm, Mitchell Dynamics. He had sat across from me at a coffee shop. He wouldn't come to my apartment, which was actually a dummy address I used, and sworn on his unborn child that this was the last time he would need help. He had looked so earnest, so stressed. I moved the cursor down, line by line, the numbers blurring into a single, sickening sum. April, May, June, it was relentless. Car repairs, unexpected tax bills, a once-in-a-lifetime investment opportunity that required immediate liquidity, and then I reached the bottom of the list. The most recent entry, dated just 3 weeks ago, July 22nd, recipient, the Ivory Garden Estate, amount $12,000, note venue, deposit catering down payment. My hand froze on the mouse. I stared at the line item. The Ivory Garden Estate. The memory hit me with the force of a physical blow. It was a Tuesday night. I was in the lab, testing the heat resistance of a new polymer. My phone had rung. It was Lorraine. She was crying. That breathless, panicked sobbing that always made my stomach clench. "Madeline, please," she had gasped. "The venue, they lost our reservation. We have to rebook immediately, but the prices have gone up. And Gavin's liquidity is tied up in the merger. If we don't pay the deposit tonight, Paige won't have a baby shower. It will kill her. Madeline, she's so hormonal. The stress, the doctor said she needs to stay calm. Please, just this once. I will pay you back the second the trust dividend clears next month. Just this once." I had wired the money within 10 minutes. $12,000. I looked out the window again, down at the white tents and the manicured lawn. I looked at the table where my name card had been thrown in the trash. I looked at the alley where I had been told to stand. I had paid for the chair that was folded up. I had paid for the table that had no room for me. I had paid for the very aesthetic that I was apparently ruining. A cold metallic taste filled my mouth. It wasn't anger anymore. It was nausea. "Nina," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, hollow, distant. "Cross-reference the dates." "Which ones?" Nina asked, stepping closer to the screen. "All of them?" I said. "Cross-reference Gavin's requests with his social media activity, and cross-reference Mom's emergencies with her public check-ins." Nina didn't hesitate. She pulled out her own tablet and began typing furiously, her fingers flying across the screen. We worked in silence for 10 minutes. The only sound, the clicking of keys and the hum of the server rack in the corner. "Okay," Nina said, her voice tight. "Here's the first one. March 10th. The $15,000 for the startup inventory and server space." She cast the image from her tablet onto the main screen next to my spreadsheet. It was a post from Gavin's Instagram, dated March 12th, 2 days after the transfer. The photo showed Gavin and Paige on a boat, a catamaran. To be precise, the water was turquoise. They were holding cocktails with little umbrellas. The caption read, "Sometimes you just have to disconnect. Cabo San Lucas for the week. Blessed entrepreneur life." "He didn't buy servers," I whispered. "He bought a vacation." "It gets worse," Nina said. "Look at this. May 5th. You sent $6,000 to Mom for emergency roof repairs because of a leak in the master bedroom." She swiped the screen. A Facebook post from Lorraine appeared. Dated May 6th. "Spa week with the girls. Detox and retox." The location tag was a luxury wellness resort in Arizona. In the background of the selfie, there was no leaky roof, only red rocks and an infinity pool. "They lied," I said. It was a simple statement, but it felt like the floor was dropping out from under me. They didn't just need money, they lied about what it was for. "Director," Nina said, and there was a new urgency in her voice. "I just ran a quick background check on Mitchell Dynamics, the entity Gavin claims to be running. And it was dissolved by the state 4 months ago for failure to file an annual report." Nina said, "It does not exist. It is a ghost. The bank account you have been transferring money to, it's a personal checking account. It's not a business account." I leaned back in my chair. The Aeron mesh felt cool against my back. For years, I had told myself a story. I told myself that they were struggling. I told myself that Gavin was just unlucky in business, that Paige was just high maintenance but well-meaning, that Lorraine was just trying to hold the family together. I told myself that my money was a lifeline. I was the silent partner, the safety net. I was buying their security, but I wasn't buying security. I was buying their lifestyle. I wasn't a family member to them. I wasn't a sister or a daughter. I was a utility. I was a power socket in the wall. You don't thank a power socket. You don't invite a power socket to dinner. You just plug in when you need energy, and you ignore it when you don't. And when a power socket looks ugly, you put a piece of furniture in front of it, you hide it. "They are not broke," I said. The realization crystallized in my mind, sharp and jagged. "They are just spending my money instead of theirs." I looked at the $12,000 entry again, the deposit for the baby shower. Lorraine had stood at that gate and told me I wasn't worthy of the food that I had bought. Paige had smirked while she sat on a throne that my labor had paid for. The pain that had been throbbing in my chest for the last hour suddenly evaporated. In its place, a profound, absolute zero coldness settled in. It was the kind of cold that burns. It was the clarity of a balance sheet that finally balances. I sat up straight. I reached for my keyboard. "Nina," I said, "get the legal team on the line." But first, I opened the banking portal. I navigated to the Recurring Transfers tab. There were 5 active setups, one for Lorraine's mortgage supplement, one for Paige's car note, one for Gavin's business support, 2 for credit cards. I was listed as a guarantor on. I clicked the first box, select all. The screen prompted, "Are you sure you want to cancel all recurring transfers? This action cannot be undone without reauthorization. I didn't hesitate. I didn't tremble. My hand was steady as a surgeon's. I am not just a source of funds, I said to the empty room. I am the bank, and the bank is closing. I clicked confirm. Status cancelled. Then I went to the credit cards tab. I selected the black card ending in 4098, the one Lorraine carried in her purse, the one she had likely used to pay for the extras at the party today. The card that had unlimited limit because it was tied to my primary asset account. Freeze card. Report is compromised. Compromised is accurate, I muttered. My trust was compromised. I looked up at Nina. She was watching me with a look of fierce approval. It is done, I said. The tap is off. The well is dry. I turned back to the window. Down below, the party was in full swing. I could see waiters bringing out trays of champagne. I could see Gavin laughing with a group of men, probably bragging about a deal he never made. They were drinking and eating and celebrating, completely unaware that the invisible infrastructure that held up their lives had just been dismantled. They thought they had sent me to the wilderness. They didn't realize that by sending me here, they had sent me to the control room. They wanted me out of the picture, I said softly. So I am taking myself out of the equation, entirely. I looked at the time. It was 2:45. The main bill for the party, the balance due after the deposit, plus the inevitable overages for open bar and extra hours, would be run at the end of the event. Or, if the venue manager was diligent, he would run a pre-authorization check right about now. Let's see what happens, I said. When the power goes out? The phone felt heavy in my hand, not because of its physical weight, but because of the magnitude of the call I was about to make. It was a sleek, black device, an encrypted line that bypassed standard switchboards. I did not dial a customer service number. I dialed the direct private line of my dedicated relationship manager at the wealth management firm that handled the North Pier accounts. Simon, I said the moment the line connected. My voice was devoid of inflection. It was the voice I used when negotiating with textile suppliers who were trying to gouge me on raw silk prices. This is Madeline Rivera. I need to execute a Protocol 0 on the family access accounts. There was a brief pause on the other end, the kind of silence that comes from a professional who is trained not to ask questions, but is certainly thinking them. Simon had been managing my portfolio for 6 years. He had seen the outflows. He had seen the hemorrhaging of cash into accounts named Lorraine Rivera and Paige Mitchell. He had gently suggested restructuring those contributions a dozen times, and a dozen times I had told him to let it slide. Protocol 0, Ms. Rivera, Simon asked, his tone dropping to a hush. Just to confirm, you mean a total cessation of all third-party authorizations linked to your primary liquidity trust? This includes the supplementary platinum cards and the automated mortgage supports. Everything, I said. I want the supplementary cards canceled immediately, not suspended, canceled. I want them to register as invalid the next time a chip is inserted. I want the auto-pay features for the Mount Pleasant property and the lease on the BMW X5 terminated, and the standing order for the monthly allowance transfer to Gavin Mitchell. Kill it? Understood, Simon said. I could hear the clicking of his keyboard. It was a rapid, staccato sound, like gunfire in the distance. I am processing the request now. The credit lines will be severed in approximately 30 seconds. The bank transfers scheduled for the first of the month will be deleted. Ms. Rivera, I feel obligated to inform you that the supplementary card ending in 4098, the one issued to your mother, has a pending authorization request from about 10 minutes ago. It is for a substantial amount, $4,000. It looks like it is for the Ivory Garden, additional services. I stared at the wall of monitors in front of me. $4,000. They were ordering more. Maybe vintage champagne. Maybe an extension on the photographer's hours. They were spending money they thought was endless, effectively drinking my blood from a crystal flute. Decline it, I commanded. Decline the pending charge, Simon clarified. Decline it, I repeated. Mark it as unauthorized. If the merchant calls for a manual override, tell them the cardholder reported the account closed. Do not give them an explanation. Just give them the decline code. Done, Simon said. The authorization has been rejected. The card is now a piece of plastic. Is there anything else? Prepare a full statement, I said. I want a digital ledger of every single dollar that has flowed from my accounts to any member of the Mitchell or Rivera family over the last 5 years. Categorize it by recipient and expense type. I want it in a PDF, locked, sent to my secure server within the hour. I will have it to you in 10 minutes, Simon replied. Madeline, are you all right? I am excellent, Simon, I said. I am finally balancing the books. I ended the call. The silence that returned to the room was different now. It wasn't the silence of waiting. It was the silence of a fuse burning down. I placed the phone on the glass desk and looked at Nina. It is done, I told her. Nina nodded. She didn't smile. This wasn't a happy occasion, but her shoulders relaxed, as if a weight she had been carrying on my behalf had finally been lifted. She tapped her tablet. I have drafted an email to our corporate counsel. Jacobson and Moore. I am not sending it yet, but I have it ready. Subject line: potential harassment and asset protection. If Gavin or your mother try to storm the building when their cards get declined, we need a legal shield. They will not storm the building yet, I said, checking the time on my monitor. It was nearly 3 o'clock in the afternoon. First comes the confusion, then comes the denial, then comes the panic. They will try the card again. They will call the bank and get a recording. They will look at each other and realize the safety net is gone. I turned to the intercom system on my desk and pressed the button for the security station. Ramon, I said. Go ahead. Director. Ramon's deep voice crackled back instantly. I need you to unlock the Southgate service corridor, I instructed. The one that connects our loading dock to the rear alley of the venue. Do not open the door wide. Just disengage the magnetic seal so it can be pushed open from the outside, but keep the secondary blast doors to the main lobby locked down tight. Code red access only. You expecting visitors, boss? Ramon asked. I am expecting a message, I said. I want to make sure that when the bill collector comes looking for the person who is supposed to pay, the path leads them to the edge of my property. I want them to see the logo on the wall, but I do not want them inside. Copy that, Ramon said. Southgate unlocked. Perimeter secure. I will be watching the cameras. I leaned back in my chair. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. For years, I had operated under a delusion. I believed that if I gave enough, if I supported enough, if I was useful enough, eventually they would see me. I thought the money was a bridge. It wasn't a bridge. It was a toll booth, and I was the only one paying. I swiveled my chair toward the printer in the corner. It whirred to life, spitting out the documents Simon had generated. Page after page slid into the tray. I stood up and walked over to it. I picked up the stack. It was warm. I flipped through it. 5 years of transactions. Tuition for Gavin's coding boot camp. He quit after 2 weeks, $6,000. Page's mental health retreat in Bali, $8,000. Lorraine's cosmetic dentistry, $12,000. It totaled over $200,000. $200,000 of my hard work, my sleepless nights, my stress, poured into a black hole that didn't even have the decency to offer me a chair at a baby shower. I walked back to my desk and dropped the stack of papers next to the brown paper bag. The contrast was striking. The cold, hard evidence of their greed next to the humble, rejected offering of my love. I looked at the bag. I reached in and touched the soft, cool fabric of the blanket. I had woven the family crest into the corner, a subtle, tone-on-tone design that only became visible when the light hit it a certain way. I had thought it was a clever nod to our heritage. Now, it just felt pathetic. Director, a new voice chimed in. It was the logistics coordinator from the floor below, speaking through the desktop comms. Sorry to interrupt. The Osaka shipment is pinging the geofence. The driver is 20 minutes out. We need your signature on the customs release for the graphene additives. I blinked, snapping back to reality. That was right. I had a shipment coming in. A shipment worth $500,000 that would determine the production schedule for the next quarter. I had employees depending on me. I had clients in the military and the aerospace sector waiting for these materials. My life did not revolve around a garden party in Charleston. My life was global. My life was consequential. "I am on it," I replied, my voice strong. "I will sign the digital release now. Have the dock crew prepped for offloading. I want those samples in the lab by 4 o'clock. "Yes, ma'am." I looked at Nina. "You were right," I said. "I have a company to run." "You have a life to run," Nina corrected. I sat down and pulled up the customs forms. I started reading the manifest, checking the serial numbers, verifying the weights. It was mundane work, but it felt grounding. It felt real. Every keystroke was a reminder that I was competent, that I was powerful, that I was necessary, outside, across the alley. The music was probably swelling. Paige was probably opening gifts, holding up onesies and silver rattles, soaking in the applause. Lorraine was probably sipping her third mimosa, feeling smug about how perfect everything looked now that the stain of my presence was gone. But in a few minutes, the music would stop. The venue manager, a man named Mr. Caldwell. I knew him from the initial contract, would be approaching the end of his patience. He would run the card for the final tab. He would see the declined message. He would try again. He would get the same result. He would walk out into the garden, weaving through the white flowers and the smiling guests. He would tap Lorraine on the shoulder. He would ask for a word, and the facade would crack. I wasn't doing this to be cruel. I was doing it to be free. I picked up the brown paper bag one last time. I didn't feel the sting of rejection anymore. I felt the relief of closure. I walked over to the storage cabinet where we kept the company archive samples of past work, old prototypes, things we kept for reference. I placed the bag on the shelf, next to a spool of Kevlar thread. "You stay there," I whispered to the blanket. "You were made for family. I guess I just have to find a new definition of what that word means." I closed the cabinet door. The latch clicked. "Nina," I said, turning back to the room. "Is the legal team on standby?" "They are ready," Nina said. "Jacobson said he is just waiting for your signal to file the restraining orders if they get aggressive." "Good," I said. I looked at the screen where the live feed from the security cameras displayed the loading dock and the alleyway. I could see the back gate of the Ivory Garden venue. It was quiet for now, but I knew the storm was brewing. I felt a strange sense of peace. It was the peace of a decision made, a line crossed. I wasn't waiting for their apology anymore. I wasn't waiting for their permission. "It is finished," I said. "Now they will know what it is like to have no seat and no money." I turned my attention back to the customs manifest. The first line item was high-tensile carbon fiber, strong, resilient, under pressure. It didn't break. It just became harder, just like me. The intercom on my desk buzzed, cutting through the silence of the office like a saw. It was Ramon, my head of security, and his voice was tight with suppressed amusement. "Director," he said, "we have a situation at the South Dock. There is a man here. He is wearing a tuxedo that is soaking wet with sweat, and he is demanding to speak to the owner of the card, ending in 4098. He says his name is Mr. Caldwell." I looked at Nina. A grim smile touched the corners of her mouth. "Send him to the loading bay platform," I said into the speaker. "I will meet him there. Do not let him inside the secure zone. Just the platform." I stood up. "Come with me. Nina, bring the tablet." We took the service elevator down to the ground floor. The loading bay was a cavernous space, smelling of ozone and fresh packing crates. The huge bay door that faced the alley was rolled up, revealing the slice of paved ground that separated my world from theirs. Standing on the concrete ramp, looking like a man who had just run a marathon in a sauna, was Mr. Caldwell. I recognized him immediately. He was the venue manager for the Ivory Garden estate. Usually, he was the picture of composure, but right now, his bow tie was undone, his face was beet red, and he was clutching a mobile payment terminal in one hand and a long, crumpled receipt in the other. He looked up as I walked out of the shadows of the warehouse. He saw the high-tech facility behind me, the forklifts moving silently, the workers in clean, branded uniforms, the sheer scale of the operation. He blinked, clearly confused. He had expected a back alley, not a logistics hub. "Can I help you, Mr. Caldwell?" I asked. My voice echoed slightly in the large space. He squinted at me. Recognition dawned slowly. I was the girl in the hoodie he had seen being shoved toward the exit earlier, but now, I was standing with my arms crossed, flanked by my director of material science and 2 large security officers. "You," he stammered. He looked at the receipt, then at me. "You are Madeline Rivera." "I am," I said. "Thank God," he exhaled, wiping sweat from his forehead with his sleeve. "Ms. Rivera, we have a major problem. The card on file, the platinum card, it is declining. I have tried it 4 times. I called the merchant services line, and they said the account is closed. Reported compromised?" "That is correct," I said calmly. "It is closed." Caldwell looked like he might faint. "Closed, Ms. Rivera. The party is effectively over. We are at the final settlement phase. The deposit covered the base rental. Yes, but the consumption bill, the incidentals." He waved the receipt in the air. "I cannot close out the event without payment, and the client, your mother, is insisting the machine is broken." "Let me see the bill," I said. He handed me the crumpled strip of paper. Nina stepped closer, looking over my shoulder. I read the items listed there, and my eyebrows rose. The audacity was breathtaking. Vintage Dom Perignon champagne, 6 bottles, $3,600, Beluga caviar, service 4 ounces, $800, live harpist. Overtime, 2 hours, $600, floral arrangement. Add-ons, imported white orchids, $2,500, cleaning fee, confetti cannon deployment, $500. The total outstanding balance, sitting at the bottom in bold black ink, was $8,450. This was in addition to the $12,000 I had already paid. They had burned through nearly $10,000 in 4 hours on alcohol and flowers, assuming that the magic card would just absorb it all. "Interesting," I said, handing the receipt back to him. "Interesting," Caldwell sputtered. "Ms. Rivera, this is critical. If this bill is not paid in the next 10 minutes, I have to call the police. That is company policy for theft of services over $5,000. I need a valid card." I looked him in the eye. "Mr. Caldwell, I paid the deposit. That was my gift to my sister. It was a generous gift, $12,000. I pointed to the itemized list in his hand. "However," I continued, my voice hardening, "I did not drink that champagne. I did not eat that caviar. I did not request the harpist to stay for an encore. And I certainly did not authorize the confetti cannons." "But you are the financier," Caldwell pleaded. Mrs. Rivera said. "Mrs. Rivera was mistaken," I interrupted. "I am not the financier. I am a guest who was not even given a seat. I have no obligation to pay for a party I was thrown out of." I took a step closer to the edge of the dock. "If you want that money, Mr. Caldwell, you are asking the wrong person. Go back to the table. Ask the woman who ordered the champagne. Ask the man who claims to be a wealthy tech entrepreneur. Ask the pregnant woman sitting on the throne." Caldwell looked at me, then at the menacing steel structure of my building, and finally back at the alley leading to the garden. He realized he was not getting a cent from me. "I will have to confront them," he said, his voice trembling. "It will be a scene. The guests are still there." "Then I suggest you make it a loud scene," I said, "so they understand the gravity of the situation." Caldwell turned and ran back down the alley. "Ramon," I said, "open the service gate just enough for us to see, but keep the mesh screen down. I want to watch." We walked to the edge of the property. The heavy steel gate that separated the alley from the venue slid open with a mechanical hum, leaving a chain-link barrier between us and the garden. I stood there, hidden in the shadows of the loading dock. looking directly into the heart of the ivory garden. The scene was picturesque. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow over the white tablecloths. Guests were mingling, holding flutes of the expensive champagne I had refused to pay for. Paige was still sitting on her velvet chair, opening gifts. She was holding up a silver breast pump, feigning excitement. Then, Mr. Caldwell burst into the frame. He didn't wait for a polite pause. He marched straight up to the head table where Lorraine and Gavin were sitting. He slammed the receipt down on the linen tablecloth, knocking over a crystal water glass. The music stopped. The chatter died instantly. I couldn't hear every word from this distance, but the acoustics of the garden were excellent, and Caldwell was shouting. "Declined!" His voice rang out. Every time the bank says the account is dead. I saw Lorraine stand up. She looked indignant, her face flushing pink. She said something to him, pointing a finger at his chest. Caldwell wasn't having it. He held up the payment terminal. "I don't care about glitches. Ma'am, I have $8,000 of product consumed here. You told me to keep the bar open. You told me to pop the vintage bottles. Who is paying for this?" Gavin stood up now. He adjusted his blazer, trying to look imposing. He pulled a wallet from his pocket. I saw him slap a card onto the table. It was a gold card. Caldwell snatched it up. He swiped it aggressively through the machine. We waited. Even from 50 yards away, I could feel the tension. Beep! Caldwell looked at the screen. He shook his head. He swiped it again. Beep! "Declined," Caldwell announced, his voice loud enough for the back row of guests to hear. "Insufficient funds." A ripple of murmurs went through the crowd. I saw the elite of Charleston exchanging glances. Phones were beginning to emerge from handbags. The recording had started. Gavin looked panic-stricken. He fumbled for another card, a blue one this time. Swipe, beep, declined. "This machine is faulty," Gavin yelled. "Do you know who I am? I am the CEO of Mitchell Dynamics." "Your card says you are broke, sir," Caldwell yelled back. "I am calling the authorities." Then Lorraine lost it. The facade of the perfect hostess cracked, and the desperate, entitled woman underneath clawed her way out. She didn't care about the guests anymore. She just wanted the problem fixed, and she knew only one way to fix it. She screamed. It was a shrill, piercing sound. "It is Madeline's card," she shrieked. "It is Madeline's account. She must have locked it, that ungrateful little brat." The silence that followed was absolute. Lorraine had just admitted, in front of 50 of her most judgmental friends, that she wasn't paying for the party, that Gavin wasn't paying, that the vagrant daughter she had hidden in the alley was the bankroll for the entire operation. Madeline, a woman at the next table, whispered loud enough to be heard. "The one they wouldn't let sit down." "The one in the hoodie?" another guest asked. And then Paige looked up. She had been frozen on her throne, clutching the silver breast pump like a shield. But when Lorraine screamed my name, Paige's head snapped toward the alley. She knew where I had been sent. She knew where the trash was supposed to be waiting. Her eyes scanned the service entrance. And there, standing behind the chain-link mesh, framed by the steel beams of the North Pier loading dock, she saw me. I stepped forward, just an inch, letting the ambient light from the garden catch my face. I wasn't hiding. I wasn't cowering. I was standing tall, flanked by security, watching her world burn. Paige turned pale. It wasn't a gradual fade. It was instant. The color drained from her face as if someone had pulled a plug. She looked at me, and for the first time in her life, she didn't see her little sister. She saw the reality of her situation. She saw the bills. She saw the mortgage. She saw the car payments. She saw the lie of her husband's success. She realized that the money mine she had been excavating for years had just collapsed, and she was trapped inside. Gavin saw me too. He pointed a shaking finger at the alley. "You?" he shouted. He started to run toward the fence, knocking over a chair. "You did this. You locked the accounts. That is illegal. That is financial abuse. I will sue you." He reached the edge of the manicured grass, right where the property line ended and the alley began. Mr. Caldwell was right behind him, grabbing his arm. "Sir, You are not going anywhere until this bill is settled. Gavin shook him off and lunged toward the chain-link fence. Madeline, unlock the card. Right now, you are humiliating us. I looked at him. He looked pathetic. A man in a rented suit screaming at a woman who owned the block he was standing on. I pressed the button on the gate controls. The heavy steel mesh began to rise slowly, just enough for me to speak without shouting. I am not humiliating you, Gavin, I said. My voice was calm, carrying perfectly in the evening air. I am simply declining to participate. You promised, Lorraine wailed from the table. You promised to support the family. I supported the family, I replied. I paid for the roof over your head. I paid for the car you drove here. I paid $12,000 for a deposit on a party where you threw my name in the trash. I saw the guests gasping. They were recording everything. This wasn't just a scene. It was a viral moment in the making, the fall of the House of Mitchell. You are invisible to us, Paige cried out, tears finally streaming down her face. Tears of rage, not sorrow. You are nobody. You are just a shadow. I looked at my sister. I looked at the fear in her eyes. She was right about one thing. To them, I had been invisible. You are right, Paige, I said. I am invisible. I took a step back into the warehouse. I signaled Ramon. And if I am invisible, I said, delivering the final verdict, then my money is invisible too. No, Madeline. Wait, Gavin screamed, realizing the lifeline was being severed. I hit the button on the wall. Clang. The massive steel blast door of the loading dock began to roll down. It was a heavy industrial shutter, the kind used to secure millions of dollars of inventory. It moved with a loud, rhythmic rattling that drowned out their protests. I watched through the narrowing gap as Gavin threw himself against the chain-link fence, impotent and furious. I watched Mr. Caldwell grab him by the shoulder, pulling out his phone to dial 911. I watched Lorraine sink into her chair, burying her face in her hands as the flashes of smartphone cameras went off around her like fireworks. And then, the metal door hit the concrete floor with a final, resounding thud. The light from the garden was cut off. The screams were muffled into silence. I was back in the cool, white, controlled environment of North Pier. I stood there for a moment, staring at the gray metal. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. Director, Ramon said softly. The cameras show the police arriving at the front gate of the venue. Good, I said. Make sure our perimeter is sealed. I do not want any spillover. I turned to Nina. She was holding the tablet, her eyes wide. That, she said, was kinetic. That, I corrected, walking back toward the elevator, was overdue. I drove home in silence. My home was not the cramped basement studio apartment on the edge of town that I rented for show. The one with the flickering hallway light and the mailbox I purposefully let overflow with junk mail to maintain the illusion of my chaotic, failing life. That was the decoy. That was the stage set I used when Lorraine insisted on dropping by to criticize my housekeeping. I drove to my real home. It was a penthouse on the top floor of a converted sugar refinery, 3 miles from the warehouse. It was a space of concrete, glass, and reclaimed timber, designed with the same brutalist functional elegance as my company headquarters. There were no doilies here. There were no pastel throw pillows. There was a chef's kitchen with a wolf range I rarely used but kept immaculate, a living area with a panoramic view of the Ravenel Bridge, and a security system that rivaled the one at the Federal Reserve. I walked inside and locked the door. The heavy bolt slid into place with a satisfying thud. I kicked off my sneakers, the scuffed ones I wore as part of my costume, and left them by the door. I padded across the heated concrete floors in my socks, the silence of the apartment wrapping around me like a physical shield. But the silence was not absolute. In my pocket, my phone was having a seizure. It had been vibrating rhythmically against my hip for the entire drive, a relentless, angry buzzing that felt like a swarm of hornets trying to sting me through the denim. I pulled it out and tossed it onto the kitchen island. It spun on the marble surface, the screen lighting up the dim room with flash after flash of notifications. Lorraine Rivera, 14. Missed calls. Paige Mitchell, 9 missed calls. Gavin Mitchell, 22. Missed calls. Unknown number 3 missed calls. I poured myself a glass of sparkling water, adding a slice of lemon with precise, steady hands. Then, I leaned against the counter and looked down at the device. I did not feel fear. I did not feel the crushing weight of guilt that used to suffocate me whenever I displeased them. I felt the detached curiosity of a scientist examining a petri dish of bacteria that had suddenly become aggressive. I unlocked the screen. The messages spilled out, a digital vomit of entitlement and rage. I read them chronologically, treating them not as communication from loved ones, but as evidence in a case study of narcissism. Lorraine, 5:12 p.m. Pick up the phone. Right now. You have humiliated us. Mrs. Higgins was recording. Do you know who Mrs. Higgins is? Her husband sits on the board of the club. Pick up Lorraine, 5:15 p.m. The police are here. They are asking for a card. Come back here and pay this bill immediately. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Madeline, do not do this to your sister. Lorraine, 5:45 p.m. You are a selfish, spiteful girl. I raised you better than this. To leave a pregnant woman crying in front of the elite of Charleston, you are sick. I scrolled past her messages. Not a single question about where I had gone. Not a single inquiry into why my card was declined or if I was having financial trouble. Just commands. Just worry about the optics. To Lorraine. I wasn't a daughter who had reached her breaking point. I was a prop that had fallen over during a performance. I opened Paige's thread. Paige. 6:02 p.m. I can't believe you ruined my shower. This was supposed to be my day. You have always been jealous of me. You have always hated that I am the one who succeeded. Paige, 6:10 p.m. My blood pressure is spiking. If I lose this baby, it is on your hands. Are you happy now you get to be the center of attention that is all you ever wanted? Paige. 6:30 p.m. Gavin is furious. You better fix this. Jealous, I said aloud to the empty room. The word hung in the cool air. She thought I was jealous. She thought I looked at her life, a life funded by credit debt, a life married to a man who lied about his job, a life spent frantically curating an image for social media and wanted it. She didn't understand that I had built a fortress of solitude because I valued peace over applause. She thought I was losing because I wasn't playing her game. She didn't realize I owned the stadium. Then, I got to Gavin. Gavin's messages were different. They weren't just emotional outbursts. They were the erratic, escalating thrashings of a trapped animal realizing the cage was smaller than he thought. Gavin, 5:30 p.m. Maddie, this is ridiculous. Just unlock the card. I will pay you back next week when the seed funding clears. Don't be a bitch. Gavin, 6:00 p.m. The cops are taking a report. They are calling it theft of services. Do you want your mother to be arrested? Come back. Gavin, 7:15 p.m. I saw the building, the warehouse. I paused. My finger hovered over the screen. Gavin, 7:17 p.m. That wasn't a dump. I saw the security gate. I saw the staff. I saw the logo on the wall inside. North Pier. I looked it up. Gavin, 7:45 p.m. You have been holding out on us. You sit there in your hoodie acting like you are broke, and you are sitting on a company you have been lying to the family for years. Gavin, 8:05 p.m. Hiding assets is illegal. Madeline, if you are part of the family trust, you have a fiduciary duty to disclose income. You can't just hoard money while your sister struggles. That is fraud. I set the glass of water down. The condensation left a wet ring on the marble. There it was, the shift. Lorraine and Paige were worried about the social fallout, but Gavin didn't care about the neighbors. Gavin had seen the infrastructure. He had seen the blast door. He had done a quick Google search and likely found the corporate filings that listed North Pier as a multi-million-dollar entity. He wasn't angry that I had embarrassed them. He was angry that I had escaped the net. He was angry that there was a gold mine right under his nose that he hadn't been able to excavate. And now, he was trying to weaponize the law. Fiduciary duty? It was a bluff. I had no legal obligation to share my self-made wealth with them. And the family trust? was a pittance that Lorraine controlled. Not a shared corporate entity, but it showed his intent. He wasn't going to apologize. He was going to come for what he thought he was owed. He was hunting. I picked up the phone again and dialed a number that was not in my contacts, but was memorized in my head. "Ramon?" I said when he answered on the first ring. "Director," Ramon replied. Background noise suggested he was still at the facility. Quiet night on the perimeter so far, but the internet chatter is picking up. Someone posted a video of the Ivory Garden meltdown on TikTok. It has 50,000 views. "I do not care about TikTok," I said, my voice cold. "I care about physical security. I need you to upgrade the access protocols immediately, revoke all guest passes, reset the keypad codes for the executive suite, and I want a 24-hour guard detail posted at the main lobby and the loading dock." "You think they will try to come back?" Ramon asked. "I think my brother-in-law just realized he has been starving next to a banquet," I said. "He is desperate, and desperate men do stupid things. If anyone named Mitchell or Rivera steps foot on the asphalt, I want them stopped. Use the trespass warnings we posted. If they refuse to leave, detain them and call the city police. Do not call me first." "Understood," Ramon said. "I will put the night shift on high alert. We are locking down." I hung up and immediately dialed Nina. "I saw the texts," Nina said before I could even say hello. She had access to my mirrored cloud server for security reasons. "Gavin is pivoting. He is trying to build a narrative that you defrauded them. He is grasping at straws," I said. "He has no legal standing. My company is an LLC, totally separate from the family estate." "He doesn't need legal standing to cause a headache," Nina warned. "He can file nuisance lawsuits. He can tip off the IRS to trigger an audit just to spite you. He can try to claim that the money you loaned them previously was actually an investment in his business, giving him a stake in yours." I rubbed my temples. "He never had a business. Nina, we proved that." "Exactly," Nina said. "But we need to cement that proof. I suggest we hire a forensic accounting firm. Tonight, I want a third-party audit of every dime you ever gave them versus every dime they claim to spend. I want to build a dossier that shows they were the ones misappropriating funds, not you. If he tries to sue for hidden assets, we counter-sue for embezzlement and fraud." "Do it," I said. "Get the best firm in the city. I don't care what it costs. I want the paperwork to be so heavy it crushes him." "I will make the call," Nina said. "Madeline." "Yes." "Are you okay?" I paused. It was the first time anyone had asked me that question since I arrived at the party 5 hours ago. "I am fine, Nina," I said, and I was surprised to find that it was the truth. "I feel clean. It is like I finally took a shower after swimming in a sewer." "Get some sleep," Nina said. "Tomorrow is going to be loud." I hung up the phone. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window. The lights of Charleston twinkled in the distance. Somewhere down there, in a house I had helped pay for. My family was likely convening a war council. They were drinking wine, feeding each other indignation, and convincing themselves that they were the victims of a cruel, secretive sister. They didn't understand. They thought this was a negotiation. They thought that if they screamed loud enough, or threatened hard enough, I would revert to the scared little girl who just wanted a seat at the table. They didn't know that girl was gone. My phone buzzed one last time. A final message for the night. It was from Gavin. "Gavin, 9:45 p.m. You think you can lock us out? I am coming to the warehouse tomorrow morning at 9. I know you are running a business there. I am bringing a lawyer. If you do not let me in to inspect the books and discuss my settlement for the distress you caused my wife, I am calling the police and reporting you for corporate fraud. See you at 9. I stared at the text. Settlement. Corporate fraud. He was coming to my territory. He was coming to the place where I was not Madeline the Smudge, but Director Rivera. He was coming to the one place on earth where I held absolute power. I typed a reply. I didn't send it. I just typed it out to see how it looked. Come ahead. But bring your checkbook. I deleted the draft. I didn't need to warn him. I turned off the lights in the kitchen, leaving the penthouse in darkness. I wasn't afraid of tomorrow. In fact, for the first time in years, I was looking forward to a family gathering, because this time, I wasn't going to be sitting at their table. They were going to be standing in front of my desk. The red light on my bedroom ceiling was not a panic alarm. It was a silent notification, a pulse of crimson that washed over the gray duvet cover, signaling a perimeter breach at the facility. I rolled over and checked the time on the bedside tablet. It was 5:45 in the morning. Gavin had texted that he would be there at 9. But criminals and desperate men rarely stick to a schedule. I threw off the covers and walked to the wall-mounted monitor next to the closet. I tapped the screen, bringing up the live feed from the North Pier security grid. The image was crisp, rendered in high-definition infrared that turned the pre-dawn darkness into a ghostly grayscale. There he was. Gavin was standing at the employee side entrance, the one tucked away near the ventilation units, the one less visible from the main street. He was wearing a dark windbreaker and a baseball cap pulled low, looking less like a CEO and more like a burglar in a bad movie. In his hand, he held a plastic card. He was swiping it against the reader, over and over again. Access denied. The red LED on the reader flashed repeatedly. I pressed the intercom button that connected directly to the night watch post. "Ramon?" I said. My voice was rough with sleep but steady. "I see him." "Good morning. Director?" Ramon's voice came back instantly. He sounded wide awake. "He has been at it for 3 minutes. He is using an old generic RFID card. The system identifies it as a guest pass from a trade show we hosted 2 years ago. It is completely deactivated. Obviously. Do you want me to send a patrol to remove him? We can have him pinned to the pavement in 30 seconds. "No," I said, watching Gavin kick the bottom of the door in frustration. "Not yet. Keep the camera on him. Is he alone?" "He appears to be alone at the door," Ramon replied. "But Director, you need to see the server logs. I was about to call you when the perimeter alarm tripped. This physical attempt, it is just the backup plan." "What do you mean?" I asked, pulling on a pair of black joggers and a thick wool sweater. "Check your secure inbox," Ramon said. "I just forwarded the report. Someone tried to brute force the external firewall last night, starting at roughly 2 o'clock in the morning and ending at 4. I moved to the desk in the corner of the room, my heart rate picking up speed. I wasn't scared of Gavin, the brother-in-law. I could handle his shouting, but a cyber attack was different. That was my livelihood. That was my employees' safety. I opened the log file. It was a dense waterfall of data, but the pattern was unmistakable. Thousands of login attempts per second, originating from a masked IP address that bounced through servers in Eastern Europe, but the targeting was specific, very specific. They hadn't tried to access the bank accounts. They hadn't tried to access the payroll data. The attack was focused entirely on a subdirectory labeled R&D, patents, proprietary formulas. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. "He is not looking for money," I whispered. "He is looking for the blueprints." "Exactly," Nina's voice chimed in. She was already online, likely monitoring the same alert from her home. "Madeline, this is not just a family dispute anymore. This is corporate espionage. If he gets the molecular structure for the Sigma weave, he can sell it to our competitors in China or Vietnam. The black market value of that patent alone is $5 million. I stared at the screen. Gavin was still there on the monitor, now trying to pry the reader cover off with what looked like a pocket knife. "He tried to hack us," I said, the realization settling in like concrete. "He hired someone, or bought a script online, to crack the server. When that failed, he decided to break in physically to try and find a hard copy or an unlocked terminal. He is desperate," Nina said. "He owes money to people who do not send polite late notices. He needs a big asset to liquidate. He thinks your intellectual property is his ticket out of debt." "He is right," I said. "It is a ticket, but not out of debt. It is a ticket to prison." I made a decision. If I sent the guards to chase him away now, he would just be a trespasser. He would get a slap on the wrist, a restraining order, and he would be back in a month with a better plan or a more dangerous hacker. I needed to catch him. I needed to let him hang himself. Ramon, I said, my voice turning into the cold, sharp instrument I used in boardrooms. Do not arrest him. Director. Ramon sounded confused. I said do not arrest him. I repeated. Listen to me very carefully. I want you to unlock the employee entrance, just the outer door. Let him into the decontamination vestibule. You want to let him in. I want to guide him, I said. Unlock the corridor leading to conference room B. Lock every other door on that hallway. Seal the server room with the physical deadbolts. Disable the network ports in conference room B so they are air-gapped. Then, turn on the lights in that room. Make it look like an invitation. You are setting a trap, Ramon said, the smile audible in his voice now. I am setting a meeting, I corrected. He wanted to see the CEO. I will give him the CEO. I grabbed my phone. I didn't call the police, not yet. The police would just take a statement. I needed higher ground. I dialed a number I had saved under legal crisis. It belonged to Marcus Sterling, a senior prosecutor in the district attorney's office whom I had worked with on a fraud prevention initiative for local businesses. Madeline, Marcus answered on the second ring. It is 6 a.m. Please tell me your factory isn't on fire. The factory is fine, Marcus, I said. But I have an intruder, my brother-in-law. He attempted a cyber breach of my servers last night to steal trade secrets, and he is currently trying to break into my facility physically. Okay, Marcus said, his tone shifting instantly to professional alertness. Are you safe? I am safe. My security team has eyes on him. But Marcus, I do not want just a trespassing charge. He is trying to steal patents to cover a fraudulent bankruptcy. He has set up offshore shell companies to hide assets while claiming poverty. That is a complex web, Marcus said. If you want a felony indictment that sticks, we need intent. We need him to admit what he's looking for. If you catch him in the lobby, he can claim he was just looking for a bathroom or coming to apologize. I am going to let him into a conference room, I said. I am going to record the conversation. If I can get him to demand the patents in exchange for his silence, is that extortion? If he threatens to harm your reputation or business unless you give him proprietary data, yes, that is extortion. That is a Class E felony in South Carolina. And if he admits to the cyber attack, that is a federal crime. Thank you, Marcus, I said. If I call you in an hour, will you have officers ready? I will have a squad car around the corner, Marcus promised. Just give the signal. I hung up. I dressed quickly. I chose a black turtleneck and a sharp tailored blazer. No more hoodie, no more jeans. Today, I was dressing for a funeral I grabbed my keys and drove to the warehouse. The sun was just breaking over the horizon, painting the sky in bruises of purple and orange. When I arrived, I parked in my private bay inside the secure garage. I took the elevator up to the 3rd floor, bypassing the lobby where Gavin was likely making his way through my maze. I walked into my office. Nina was already there. She had 3 file folders arranged on my desk, perfectly aligned. The Holy Trinity, she said, tapping them one by one. Folder 1, she said, the ownership documents, proof that North Pier is 100% owned by your LLC and that the family trust has 0 equity. Folder 2, she continued. The bank statements, the full history of every transfer you made to them, the ledger of the leaching. And folder 3, she finished, her hand resting on the thickest file. The forensic accounting report. We got the preliminary results back from the firm at 3 o'clock in the morning. They worked all night. It is damning. Madeline, it traces the startup loans you gave Gavin directly to a gambling account in Nevada and a shell company in the Cayman Islands. I picked up the 3rd folder. It felt heavy. It felt like a weapon. Where is he? I asked. Ramon guided him to conference room B. Nina said, he thinks he snuck in. He found the one unlocked door and followed the lights. He is sitting in there right now, trying to plug a USB drive into the presentation screen, thinking it is a network terminal. He is trying to download the data from a TV screen, I asked, raising an eyebrow. He is not a smart man, Madeline, Nina said. He is just a greedy one. I looked at the monitor on my desk. The camera in conference room B showed Gavin. He was pacing. He looked manic. He was sweating, muttering to himself, checking his phone. He looked like a man whose world was collapsing, and he was looking for a beam to grab onto. He didn't know the beam was electrified. "Is the room secure?" I asked. "Totally," Nina said. "The doors are mag-locked. He can't get out until we release him. The windows are bulletproof glass. The Wi-Fi in that room is jammed. He is in a cage." I took a deep breath. This was it. The final confrontation. "Okay," I said. "Let's go downstairs." "Do you want security in the room with you?" Nina asked. "No," I said. "I want them outside the door. I want him to think he has the upper hand. I want him to feel confident enough to say the quiet part out loud." I picked up the 3 folders. I tucked them under my arm. We took the elevator down to the 2nd floor. The hallway was silent. The morning light streamed in through the high windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. At the end of the hall, the glass doors of conference room B were closed. I could see him through the glass. He was sitting at the head of the table now, his head in his hands. I walked down the hall, my heels clicking rhythmically on the epoxy floor. Click, click, click. Gavin's head snapped up. He saw me approaching. He didn't look ashamed. He didn't look apologetic. His face twisted into a sneer of relief and aggression. He stood up, smoothing his rumpled windbreaker. I stopped at the door. I swiped my administrator card. The lock chirped. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room smelled of his nervous sweat and stale coffee. "You are late," Gavin said. His voice was hoarse. He tried to project authority, but it cracked. "I told you 9. It is 7. I didn't answer. I walked to the opposite end of the long, white table. I placed the 3 folders down. I didn't sit. "You broke into my facility, Gavin," I said. "You attempted to bypass a security firewall. You are trespassing." "Trespassing?" Gavin laughed. It was a brittle, frantic sound. "I am family. You can't trespass at your own family's business." "This is not a family business," I said. "It is," he shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "You built this with money that should have gone to the family pot. You built this while we were struggling. That makes us investors. That makes us partners." He pointed a finger at me. "And as a partner, I am here to conduct an audit. I know you have patents, Madeline. I know about the nanofibers. I saw the trade journals. You are sitting on millions of dollars of intellectual property, and you are going to share it." "Or what?" I asked quietly. "Or I go to the press," Gavin hissed. "I tell them you are a fraud. I tell them you stole your grandmother's inheritance to fund this place. I tell them you are neglecting your pregnant sister to play CEO. I will ruin your reputation in this town. Investors hate scandal. Madeline, I will burn this place down with bad PR unless you cut me in." He took a breath, his eyes wild. "I want the specs for the Sigma weave," he demanded. "I have a buyer in Shanghai who is very interested. You give me the file, and I walk away. I forget about the baby shower. I forget about the embarrassment." I looked at him. He had just said it. He had just laid out the extortion, the corporate espionage, and the intent to sell controlled technology to a foreign entity, and the microphone hidden in the overhead light fixture had caught every syllable. "You want the file?" I asked. "Yes," Gavin said, extending his hand. "Give it to me." I reached for the folders. "I do not have the Sigma specs for you, Gavin," I said, "but I do have some reading material." I slid the first folder across the table. It spun across the smooth surface and stopped right in front of him. "What is this?" he asked, looking down at it. "That," I said, "is the beginning of your end." I stood still, watching him reach for the folder. He thought he had won. He thought he had bullied me into submission one last time. He had no idea that he had just signed his own confession. Before I could enjoy the look of terror on Gavin's face as he stared at the folder I had slid across the conference table, I had to understand the anatomy of the weapon I had just handed him, to understand the full weight of that moment. We have to rewind 3 hours, back to 4 o'clock in the morning, in my office, when the silence was broken only by the hum of the servers and the soft rustle of paper, as Nina laid out the autopsy of my financial murder. The forensic accounting firm I had hired was expensive $750 an hour, but they were surgical. They didn't just look at where the money went, they looked at the metadata of the transfers. They looked at the routing numbers. They looked at the digital fingerprints left on the transactions. "You need to see this. Madeline," Nina had said, her voice trembling slightly. She wasn't trembling from cold. She was trembling from rage. "We thought Gavin was just a failure. We thought he was bad at business. We thought he burned through your money because he was incompetent." She flipped open the main ledger, pointing to a series of transfers dated over the last 18 months. "We were wrong," she said. "He is not incompetent. He is efficient." I looked at the spreadsheet. I saw the familiar list of loans I had given him. $5,000 here for a server crash, $10,000 there for emergency inventory, $8,000 for payroll gaps. In my head, I had imagined this money disappearing into the void of a struggling startup paying for rent, electricity, maybe some bad marketing. "Look at the destination accounts," Nina instructed, tapping the paper with a manicured fingernail. I leaned in. The transfers didn't go to a business account for Mitchell Dynamics. They went to an LLC called Apex Solutions. "I have never heard of Apex Solutions," I said. "Neither had the state of South Carolina," Nina replied. So the forensic team ran a global entity search. Apex Solutions is not registered in Charleston. It is not registered in New York. She turned the page, revealing a complex diagram of wire transfers. "Apex Solutions is a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands," Nina said. "And do you know who the sole signatory is?" My stomach turned over. Gavin Mitchell," Nina confirmed. "But here's the twist. Madeline, here is the part that makes this a felony and not just a family dispute." She pulled up a bank statement from the Cayman account, obtained through what I assumed were very aggressive legal channels by the forensic team. "The money is still there," Nina whispered. I stared at the numbers. The balance on the Apex Solutions account was $215,000. My breath caught in my throat. "He didn't spend it. He spent the interest," Nina clarified. "But the principal, no. He didn't lose your money, Madeline. He stole it. He moved it from your pocket, washed it through a domestic LLC, and parked it offshore. He has been hoarding your bailouts to build his own golden parachute." I felt the blood drain from my face, replaced by a cold, vibrating fury. For years, I had listened to him cry at my kitchen table. I had watched him hold his head in his hands, weeping about how he was a failure, how he couldn't provide for Paige, how the market was tough. It was all a performance. Every tear was a lie. He wasn't struggling. He was banking my empathy. "There is more," Nina said, and her tone turned darker. "Look at the dates." She placed a second document next to the bank statement. It was a calendar of Paige's social media posts. "September 12th, Nina read. "You transferred $6,000 because Gavin said they were being evicted. He said he needed first and last month's rent for a cheaper apartment." She pointed to the Cayman statement. "September 13th, a deposit of $5,800 into Apex Solutions." Then she pointed to the Instagram printout. "September 14th, Paige posts a photo of a new Louis Vuitton Neverfull tote bag. Caption: Retail therapy is the only thing keeping me sane." "He gave her $200 for a bag," I said, my voice shaking. "And he banked the rest." "He is not just stripping you," Nina said. "He is stripping his own wife. He is keeping Paige in a state of panic, making her feel poor, making her feel dependent on you, while he sits on $250,000. It is a control scheme," I realized. If Paige thinks they are broke, she stays scared. She stays grateful to him for trying so hard, and she keeps pressuring me for money. "And to keep the scheme running," Nina said, opening the third section of the report. "He had to get creative with the paperwork." She slid a piece of paper toward me. It looked like a standard promissory note, a legal promise to repay a loan. At the bottom, there was a digital signature, Madeline Rivera. "I never signed this," I said, looking at the date. It was from last year. "I remember this loan. I gave him a check. We never did paperwork." He needed paperwork to show the bank why large sums of cash were moving through his accounts without triggering a laundering alert, Nina explained. "So he forged your electronic signature. He cut and pasted it from a birthday e-card you sent him 3 years ago." I looked closely at the signature. It was pixelated. It was a clumsy forgery, but good enough to fool an automated banking algorithm. "That is fraud," I said. "That is forgery. That is wire fraud. That is tax evasion." "It is a 20-year sentence," Nina corrected. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Gavin wasn't just a leech. He was a criminal. He had built a criminal enterprise on the foundation of my sister's womb and my guilt. "Director," Ramon's voice cut through the intercom, snapping me back to the present moment in the office. "I have something you need to hear before you go down there." "What is it?" I asked. "I pulled the audio from the perimeter microphones," Ramon said. "From 20 minutes ago, when Gavin was standing in the parking lot, before he found the open door, he was on the phone." "Play it," I commanded. Ramon patched the audio file through the room's speakers. The quality was grainy, mixed with the sound of wind and distant traffic, but Gavin's voice was unmistakable. "Yeah, I am at the warehouse now." Gavin's voice sneered from the speakers. "No, don't worry about it, baby. She's here. I saw her car." A pause. He was talking to Paige. "Look, stop crying," Gavin continued. "It is just a power play. She's insecure. You know how Maddie is. She just wants us to beg a little. I'm going to go in there, threaten to make a scene about her hiding assets, and she will cut a check to shut me up. She always does. She is weak. Paige, she doesn't have the stomach for a fight. I will have the settlement money by noon, and we can book the flights to St. Bart's. She is weak. She doesn't have the stomach. We can book the flights." I listened to the recording. I listened to him dismiss my entire existence, my entire life's work, as the tantrum of an insecure child. I listened to him plan his vacation with money he planned to extort from me. I looked at Nina. She wasn't looking at the papers anymore. She was looking at me, waiting for the order. "He thinks I am weak," I said softly. I stood up. I walked over to the closet and pulled out a blazer. I put it on, buttoning it with precise, deliberate movements. I checked my reflection in the glass of the window. I didn't see the little sister. I didn't see the aesthetic ruin. I saw the CEO of North Pier Materials. "Nina," I said, "burn the digital copies of these reports onto a secure drive. Give the originals to me." "Are we calling the police?" Nina asked. "Not yet," I said. "If we call the police now, he clams up. He gets a lawyer. He fights the charges for 5 years. I want a confession. I want him to look me in the eye and admit it, because he thinks he's winning." I picked up the folders. "Ramon," I said into the comms. "Is he in the room?" "He is in conference room B," Ramon confirmed. "He is plugging his phone into the HDMI port. He looks confident." "Excellent," I said. "Make sure the internal cameras in that room are recording to the separate litigation server. I want 4K video and high-fidelity audio. I want the jury to see the sweat on his upper lip." "Recording is active," Ramon said. "Director, be careful. A cornered rat bites." "He is not a rat," I said, walking toward the door. "He is a parasite, and I am the antibiotic." I walked out of the office and down the long, silent corridor. The 3 folders under my arm felt heavier than a gun. They contained the destruction of his life. They contained the proof that my love had been laundered into offshore accounts. I reached the door of conference room B. Through the glass, I saw him. He was checking his watch. He was practicing his angry face. He was rehearsing the speeches about family and fairness. He had no idea that the weak sister was about to walk in with a nuclear warhead. I took a deep breath. Centering myself, I wasn't doing this for revenge anymore. Revenge is emotional. This was a correction. This was balancing the ledger. I reached out and gripped the cold steel handle of the door. I pushed it open. Gavin spun around. His face arranged itself into a mask of righteous indignation. He opened his mouth to start his rehearsed tirade, to demand his settlement, to bully the girl he thought he knew, but I didn't stop walking. I walked straight to the head of the table. I threw the folders down between us. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the soundproof room. "Sit down, Gavin," I said, and for the first time in his life, he did exactly what I told him. Gavin did not sit down. Instead, he slammed his leather briefcase onto the pristine white surface of the conference table. The sound was like a gunshot, echoing off the glass walls and the polished concrete floor. It was a performance, a calculated display of male aggression designed to make the little sister flinch. I did not flinch. I did not blink. I sat at the head of the table in my Aeron chair, my hands folded loosely in my lap, watching him with the detached interest of a biologist observing a primate rattle the bars of its cage. "You have some nerve," Gavin spat, leaning over the table, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the edge. "You have some absolute nerve to summon me here like I am an employee. Do you know what you did yesterday? Do you have any idea the damage you caused?" He began to pace the length of the room, his voice rising with every step. "Paige was hysterical all night. She thinks she is having contractions. If she loses this baby, Madeline, that is on you. That is manslaughter. And the humiliation, Mrs. Higgins posted the video. It has 60,000 views. 60,000. My reputation is in tatters because you decided to play a little game with your credit limit." He stopped pacing and pointed a shaking finger at me. "I am not leaving here without a check," he declared. "I want a settlement, for emotional distress, for defamation of character, and for the breach of the verbal contract regarding family support. I want $500,000, Madeline, and I want it wired today. Or I'm going to every news outlet in Charleston and telling them that the director of North Pier is a fraud who abuses her pregnant sister." He paused, breathing heavily, waiting for me to crumble. He was waiting for the apology. He was waiting for the checkbook to come out. I slowly rotated my chair 20 degrees to the left, then 20 degrees to the right. The mechanism was silent. "Hello, Gavin," I said. My voice was soft, but in the acoustically treated room, it carried like a bell. Gavin blinked. The calmness threw him off. He had expected screaming. He had expected tears. "Don't hello me," he snapped. "Did you hear what I said? 500,000. That is the price of my silence regarding your illegal activities." "Sit down, Gavin," I said again. "I am not sitting down," he yelled. "Who do you think you are? You are a girl in a hoodie who got lucky with a few investments. You are a glorified tailor. You think because you rent a warehouse you are a player. You are nothing without the family name." I leaned forward. I placed my elbows on the table. "I am not a tailor," I said, "and I do not rent this warehouse." I reached for the first folder, the blue one, and slid it across the table with a flick of my wrist. It spun perfectly, coming to rest directly in front of his briefcase. "Read it," I said. Gavin looked at the folder, then at me. He sneered, opening it with a dismissive gesture. "What is this? More fake excuses?" He looked at the first page. It was the deed to the building. North Pier Materials Collective. Sole owner. Madeline Rivera. He flipped the page. It was the incorporation documents for the LLC. CEO and founder Madeline Rivera. He flipped again. It was the patent registration for the Sigma weave. Valued at $18 million. Inventor Madeline Rivera. The sneer vanished from his face. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. He looked up at me, and for the first time, he saw the room for what it was. He saw the high-tech equipment beyond the glass. He saw the security cameras blinking in the corners. He realized that the dump he had mocked was a fortress, and I was the commander. "You," he stammered. "You own this, all of it." "I built this," I corrected. "From the ground up, while you were posting photos of your rented boat in Cabo. I was sleeping on this floor, while you were buying fake followers for your startup. I was negotiating contracts with the Department of Defense. Gavin swallowed hard. He looked at the room again, reassessing his position. The aggression evaporated, replaced instantly by a greasy, desperate charm. He buttoned his jacket. He pulled out a chair and sat down. His posture suddenly slumped. "Maddie," he said, his voice dropping an octave to that wheedling, brotherly tone I despised. "Wow, I had no idea. This is incredible. Really, I am proud of you." He leaned in, trying to create intimacy. "Look, I am sorry I yelled. I am just stressed. You know how it is. Business is tough. The baby is coming. I just want what is best for everyone. If you have this much success, then surely you can help us out. We are family, Maddie. Family helps family." He gestured to the folder. "I mean, with assets like this, $500,000 is nothing to you. It is a drop in the bucket. Why don't you cut me in? I can help you run this place. I have experience. I can be your COO. We can keep it in the family." I stared at him. The audacity was breathtaking. He had gone from extortionist to job applicant in 30 seconds. "You want to be my COO?" I asked. "Sure," Gavin smiled, his teeth white and predatory. "I know business. I know how to manage money." "Yes," I said. "I know you do." I picked up the second folder, the red one, and dropped it onto the table. It landed with a heavy thud. "That is why we need to discuss Apex Solutions," I said. The smile froze on Gavin's face. It didn't fade. It just died, leaving a rictus of terror behind. His skin turned the color of old ash. "I don't know what that is," he whispered. "Do not lie to me," I said. My voice was no longer soft. It was a blade. "Apex Solutions, registered in the Cayman Islands. Account number ending in 772. Current balance $215,000. Gavin griped the edge of the table. His knuckles were no longer white. They were yellow. "That is a consulting client," he stuttered. "Strictly confidential." I picked up the third folder, the thickest one, the black one, and slammed it down on top of the red one. "This is the forensic accounting report," I said. "It traces every single dollar I ever gave you, the rent money, the medical bills, the bridge loans. It traces them from my account, through your domestic bank, and straight into Apex Solutions." I opened the folder and turned it around so he could see the flowchart. It was a map of his greed. "You didn't spend the money on Paige," I said. "You didn't spend it on rent. You hoarded it. You stole from me. You starved your wife, and you hid the cash offshore. You forged my electronic signature on promissory notes to avoid money laundering flags." I pointed to the forged signature on page 12. "That is a felony. Gavin, wire fraud, bank fraud, embezzlement, tax evasion." Gavin stared at the paper. He looked like a man watching his own execution. He looked up at me, his eyes wide and wet. "You," he choked out. "You investigated me." "I audited you," I said. He stood up, his chair scraping violently against the floor. He backed away from the table. "You can't prove intent," he said, his voice rising in panic. "I was holding it for the baby. It was a savings account. You can't go to the police with this. Think about Paige. Think about your mother. If you arrest me, you destroy this family." He was cornered. He was lashing out. "Your mother will never forgive you," he screamed. "She will hate you forever. Do you want that? Do you want to be alone for the rest of your life?" I looked at him. I thought about the table with no seat. I thought about the hoodie. I thought about the alley. "I have been alone for a long time, Gavin," I said. "I am comfortable with it." "You wouldn't dare," he hissed. "You are bluffing. You are too soft." I reached out to the small control panel built into the surface of the conference table. There was a single red button programmed for this exact moment. "I am the CEO," I said. "I do not bluff." I pressed the button. The side door of the conference room, the one that led to the executive corridor, slid open with a hydraulic hiss. Gavin spun around. Marcus Sterling walked in first. He was wearing his dark gray prosecutor's suit, his face grim and professional. Behind him were two uniformed police officers and a detective in plain clothes. Gavin stumbled back, hitting the wall. No, no. Gavin Mitchell, Marcus said, stepping forward. I am Assistant District Attorney Sterling. You are under arrest for grand larceny, wire fraud, and corporate extortion. The officers moved in. It wasn't a fight. It was a collapse. Gavin didn't run. He simply deflated. He let them grab his arms. He let them pull his hands behind his back. Click, click. The sound of the handcuffs ratchet locking was the loudest thing in the world. It was the sound of consequences arriving after a lifetime of delay. Madeline. Gavin screamed as they turned him toward the door. He wasn't arrogant anymore. He was a child. Madeline, please call Lorraine. Tell them to stop. I will pay it back. I will sign the money over. Please. I stood up. I walked around the table until I was standing 2 feet away from him. He looked at me, tears streaming down his face, snot running from his nose. He looked pathetic. He looked small. Madeline, please, he sobbed. I am family. You are my bank. I looked him in the eye. The bank is closed. Gavin, I said. And there is no more tap for you to turn. I nodded to the officers. They marched him out. He was still screaming my name, screaming for Paige, screaming for mercy. His voice echoed down the hallway, bouncing off the white walls of the empire I had built, until the elevator doors dinged and swallowed him whole. The room fell silent. Marcus Sterling stayed behind for a moment. He looked at the folders on the table. You gave us everything we need in a bow, he said. The recording of him demanding the patent in exchange for silence that seals the extortion charge. He is looking at 15 years. Minimum. Good, I said. Are you okay? Marcus asked. I looked at the empty chair where Gavin had sat. I looked at the briefcase he had left behind a prop for a businessman who never existed. I am fine, Marcus, I said. I just took out the trash. Marcus nodded and walked out, the door sliding shut behind him. I was alone in the conference room. I walked over to the window that looked out over the main production floor. Below me, dozens of people were working. Machines were humming. Fabric was being woven. Innovation was happening. I took a deep breath. The air tasted clean. For the first time in 30 years, the noise in my head stopped. The guilt was gone. The obligation was gone. The fear of not being enough was gone. I turned back to the table. I picked up the folder with the deed to North Pier. I smoothed the cover. They had told me I had no seat. They had told me I was ruining the picture. I looked at the reflection in the glass wall. I saw a woman in a blazer, standing in a room she owned, having just protected her life's work. I didn't need their seat. I had my own chair. And it was at the head of the table. The ink on the page was wet. A stark, glossy black signature that marked the end of an era. I set the pen down on the mahogany surface of the conference table. It made a sharp, definitive click. Marcus Sterling picked up the documents. He did not look at me with pity. He looked at me with the respect one professional accords another after a difficult negotiation. This is the formal affidavit, Marcus said, sliding the papers into his briefcase. And the temporary restraining order is effective immediately. It covers Gavin Mitchell, obviously. But per your instruction, we have extended the perimeter ban to include any associates acting on his behalf who attempt to breach North Pier security. That means my mother and my sister, I said, my voice steady. If they come onto the property to harass you or your staff, they will be removed. Marcus confirmed. If they refuse to leave, they will be arrested for trespassing. The law does not care about DNA. Madeline, it cares about property rights and safety. I nodded. Thank you. Marcus, proceed with the filing. He shook my hand and left. The room was quiet again, but it wasn't empty. Nina was there, typing furiously on her tablet. Ramon was standing by the door, his earpiece buzzing with chatter from the security team. We are locking down, Nina said, not looking up. I have initiated the Crimson Protocol. We are re-encrypting every digital keycard in the building. Unless an employee physically checks in at the security desk for a bioscan in the next hour, their old access is dead. We are auditing the server logs to make sure Gavin didn't leave any back doors open during his little field trip. Good, I said. What about the staff? The gossip will spread. I sent a memo, Nina replied. It says there was an attempted corporate espionage incident involving an external party. It says the intruder was apprehended and the site is secure. I did not use the word brother-in-law. I kept it professional. Perfect, I said. I stood up and walked to the window. The sun was fully up now, bathing the industrial district in a harsh, revealing light. It was a new day. The shadows of the night, where I had hidden in the alley, were gone. But the chaos outside was just beginning. Director, Ramon said, his hand pressing against his earpiece, you need to look at the gate monitor. The secondary wave has arrived. I walked over to the wall of screens. On the monitor labeled Main Gate, Exterior, I saw them. Lorraine and Paige had arrived. They were not the poised, elegant women from the Ivory Garden. Lorraine's hair was disheveled, escaping the hairspray helmet she usually maintained. She was wearing a tracksuit, something I had never seen her wear in public. Paige was still in her party dress from yesterday, but it was wrinkled, and she was barefoot. Holding her expensive heels in one hand, they were screaming at the intercom box. I couldn't hear them through the glass of my office, but Ramon turned up the volume on the console. Let us in. Lorraine's voice distorted through the speaker. I know she is in there, Madeline. You get out here. You ungrateful child. How dare you arrest him? How dare you? Paige was crying. But it wasn't the soft, photogenic weeping she used for sympathy. It was an ugly, red-faced sob. My husband is in a holding cell, Paige shrieked. He has never been to jail. He has asthma. Madeline, you are ruining my life. Open this gate. Ramon looked at me, his finger hovering over the talk button. Do you want to speak to them, Director? I looked at the screen. I looked at the mother who had told me I was a stain on her aesthetic. I looked at the sister who had thrown my name card in the trash because she needed the table space for her ego. They weren't asking if I was okay. They weren't asking if Gavin had actually stolen from me. They weren't horrified that Gavin had committed a felony. They were furious that I had enforced a boundary. To them, the crime wasn't the theft. The crime was the consequence. No, I said. I do not want to speak to them. What are your orders? Ramon asked. Tell them the facility is on lockdown due to a security breach, I said. Tell them that Director Rivera is unavailable. Tell them that if they do not clear the entrance in 5 minutes, we will call the police to enforce the restraining order. Ramon nodded. He pressed the button and delivered the message in his deep, immovable voice. I watched the screen. When Ramon mentioned the police, Lorraine went pale. She grabbed Paige's arm. They exchanged a look of pure terror. Not terror for me, but terror for themselves. They couldn't afford another scene. They couldn't afford another viral video. Lorraine spat at the camera lens, a final, impotent gesture of disrespect, and dragged Paige back toward their car. I watched them drive away. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. I expected it to be pain. I expected the old, familiar ache of being rejected by my family. But it wasn't pain. It was relief. It was the feeling of a heavy, rotting limb finally being amputated. They are gone, Nina said softly from behind me. They were gone a long time ago, I replied. I just finally stopped looking for them. I turned away from the screen. My phone buzzed on the desk. I picked it up. It was a text message. From Paige. I hesitated for a second. Part of me, the old part, the part that wanted to be a good sister, wondered if this was the apology. Maybe now, in the car, away from the cameras, she had realized the truth. Maybe she had realized her husband was a criminal who had been stealing from her too. Maybe she was texting to say I'm sorry. Maddie, I didn't know. I unlocked the screen. Page 10:15 a.m. Gavin's lawyer needs a $25,000 retainer by noon to start the bail process. I don't have access to the accounts because the police froze everything as evidence. You need to wire it to the firm immediately. It is the least you can do after the stunt you pulled. Fix this. Madeline, I stared at the words. Fix this. Even now. Even after the forensic accounting proved he was stealing from her. Even after he was caught on tape planning to flee the country with her money. even after she saw him in handcuffs. She didn't care that he was a thief. She only cared that the money tap had been turned off. She didn't mourn the loss of trust. She mourned the loss of funds. She wasn't a victim in her own eyes. She was an inconvenienced princess. The final knot in my stomach unraveled. There was no sister to save. There was no relationship to salvage. There was only a transaction, and I was the one canceling the contract. I typed my reply. My thumbs moved quickly, without hesitation. Madeline. You are an adult. Paige, you can pay your own bills. I hit send. Then, I did something I should have done years ago. I tapped the info icon on her contact. I scrolled down to the bottom. Block caller. I did the same for Lorraine. Block caller. I put the phone down. The silence in the room was absolute, and it was beautiful. Director, Nina said. The staff is asking what to do with the gift bag, the one you left in the intake room yesterday. I blinked. The blanket, the prototype Sigma weave I had made for the baby. Bring it here, I said. Nina left and returned a moment later with the brown paper bag. It looked so humble, so out of place in this high-tech office. I reached in and pulled out the blanket. It flowed over my hands, cool and white and impossibly soft. I looked at the weave. I saw the hours I had spent at the loom. I saw the love I had poured into every fiber. I had tried to give this to people who saw it as garbage because it didn't come in a box with a designer logo. They didn't understand that the technology in this fabric was worth more than their entire house. I wasn't going to throw it away. I wasn't going to burn it. That would be wasteful. And North Pier does not waste resources. Nina, I said, open the archive display case in the lobby. The one where we keep the Medal of Honor citations, Nina asked. Yes, I said. Place this blanket on the center stand. Put a plaque next to it. What should the plaque say? I thought for a moment. Label it Origin Point. The first successful integration of Sigma-9 nanofiber, proof that value is determined by substance, not packaging. Nina smiled. It was a genuine, bright smile. I will handle it personally. She took the blanket with reverence, holding it like the treasure it was, and left the room. I was alone. I walked out of my office and took the private elevator to the top floor. This was a space we rarely used. It was the executive dining suite, a glass-walled room that offered a 360-degree view of Charleston. The room was set for a board meeting that wasn't happening. A long, polished table stretched down the center of the room, surrounded by 20 ergonomic leather chairs. I walked to the head of the table. I looked out the window. Directly below me, across the service alley, lay the Ivory Garden. The party was long over. The tents were being dismantled by a crew of workers. The white flowers were wilting in the midday heat. The ribbons were sagging. The aesthetic was being packed into boxes and loaded into trucks. It looked small from up here. It looked temporary. I thought about the folding chair. I thought about the corner of the table where there was no room for me. I thought about the alley where I was told to stand. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a small white card. It wasn't one of their calligraphy cards. It was a simple North Pier business card. I took a pen and wrote on the back of it, Madeline Rivera. I placed the card on the table at the head seat. Then, I pulled out the chair. It wasn't a folding chair. It was solid. It was heavy. It was mine. I sat down. I looked at the view. I could see the ocean in the distance. I could see the ships coming into the harbor, carrying the materials that would build my future. I could see the city that had tried to make me feel small, now looking like a toy set beneath my feet. I didn't need them to make space for me. I didn't need to beg for a crumb of their affection or a slice of their cake. I had built my own table. I had cooked my own meal, and I had the only key to the room. I looked down at the alley one last time. I saw the spot where the Madeline of yesterday had stood, hungry and ashamed. Goodbye, I whispered to the ghost of that girl. Then, I turned my chair away from the window. I turned my back on the Ivory Garden, on the Mitchells, on the Riveras, on the entire mess of a life I used to desperate to belong to. I faced the interior of my building. I faced the monitors, the blueprints, the future. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the clean, filtered air of my own creation. I was finally full. Thank you so much for listening to this story of betrayal and justice on Maya Revenge Stories. If you enjoyed seeing Madeline take back her power, please smash that like button and hit the hype button to help this story reach more people who need to see karma in action. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Are you tuning in from work, from home, or maybe on your commute? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life drama and revenge.